Welcome to the Gradebook navigation video. Today we're going to discuss several things, including adding new assignments, entering grades for those assignments, enter custom assignment grades. We're going to discuss posting marking period grades, and finally generating reports. So as you can see, I'm already logged into the Teacher Connect Gradebook, and when I've logged in, I've changed from my roster view to my Gradebook view. Now, if you were able to watch the Gradebook setup video, hopefully you've already have your Gradebook set up with some categories, and at this point we're going to discuss adding assignments. But before we begin adding assignments, what I'd like to do is go over some basic navigation of the Gradebook. So you'll notice while I'm in my Gradebook, at the top left corner there is a classes drop-down menu, and this will give you a list of all the courses that you'll be teaching. You'll notice here the way the courses are laid out, it gives you the period number, the course number, and the course name, as well as the semesters you're teaching this course, and the days the course meets, and then the section number of the course. On the right side of the screen is the marking period drop-down menu that will allow you to move in between marking periods and even use the report card entry screen to post grades. Another drop-down menu in the Gradebook view is a year drop-down. So if you've been in the system 1 or 2 years, you can go back to previous years and look at your previous year's gradebooks, and of course you can look at your current year's gradebook. You'll notice the year that's listed in red is a future year, so you'll definitely want to stick in the 15-16 year or the current year. Below the drop-down menus we have some buttons. These first two buttons, the current and the advanced entry, are toggle buttons. So we'll begin with the current button, and what I can do with this button is I am set on current, which means I can see all of the current students in my class. If I click this button one time, it takes me to the dropped view, and in this view, if you have students who have signed up for the class and have dropped the class, or perhaps they've transferred out of the district, I just wanted to bring to your attention that you can come into this drop students view and you can still enter in assignment grades, post marking period grades, and this drop view is also available on the progress report screen. Again, this is a toggle button, and what that means is if I'm set to drop students and I exit my gradebook, the next time I come in I will continue to be on drop students until I change this view again. So if at any time you open your gradebook and you see a blank gradebook screen, the first thing I would suggest is to check and make sure you are listed on the current student view. The next button over is the advanced entry. There are two modes to this button as well. One is the advanced entry and one is a rapid entry screen. And rapid entry you're going to use once you get your assignments added and you start having grades posted in this view. And the reason you would want to view rapid entry is because there's a lot of other information on the advanced entry screen, and besides the information on advanced entry, the gradebook will also do calculations when viewing the advanced entry screen. So as you enter grades, you'll see the marking period column change and the projected final average grade change as you type in the student's grade. To speed up the grade entry method, we recommend being on the rapid entry screen, but again, this is also a toggle button, so at any time I can toggle back to my advanced entry screen. There are two different layouts when we're looking at a gradebook. By default, you come into Layout Assignments, which means your students are in rows and they work across as you enter grades. And then your homework assignments or your assignments will be listed in the columns. And when we start adding assignments, you'll be able to see how that's laid out. But I do have another setting here, and this is also a toggle button, which I can view a student layout, which basically reverses the screen. So my assignments would be in rows, and then the students would be in columns. All right, and I don't have any assignments set up in here, so right now what we're seeing are the category averages. All right, and you'll notice my students work across the top part of the page. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is there is a settings button here that will allow you to go in and change the type of things that you see on your advanced entry screen. So just as an example, if I didn't really want to see the student ID, if I uncheck this box, that column will no longer display in my advanced entry. So anything you uncheck is no longer displayed, and anything that's selected will display appropriately in the gradebook. By default, when you first come in here, I do believe the students are going to be laid out in a last, first name, and middle initial. Most of the time I see that the students are laid out in a first name, and some teachers only display the first name. So you have some options here as to how you want your students to be listed within the gradebook. Student shortcuts. This is a method that you can use to access information on the student profile. And I'm going to cover these shortcuts, but I'm going to do it when I do the video for roster training. So tune in for these shortcut buttons. My status display options are what is displayed. Let me move my screen here. In this area. So of course, when I have everything selected, I can see when my assignments are due, what category it falls into, what the possible points are, what the mean, the median, and the standard deviation is for each assignment. And something else I would like to mention is the sort order preference. One of the things that I've noticed as I've kind of worked in the gradebook, by default when you first come into your gradebook, it's set up in ascending order by assignment due date, but you have lots of options. One of the things I've come to realize as I've worked in the gradebook is that setting them up in descending order by assignment due date will put the most recent assignment on the left side of the screen and prevent the scrolling to the right as you grade assignments. So this is a nice option. So, and again, this is by assignment due date. You can also put them in ascending or descending order by category and assignment due date, ascending order by the sequence, or in other words, how you've entered the assignments. They go by the sequence that you've entered, descending order by sequence, and custom sort specific in the gradebook. And if you select your custom sort specific in the gradebook, that gives you the ability to click and drag your students where you want them on the screen. Another option that you have in the gradebook is you can display, or you can grade, I should say, past due assignments. If a student has a past due assignment, do you want that to be a blank grade or not held against the student, or would you want past due assignments to count as a 0? If you have this set to a 0 and the assignment due date passes, by default the student's going to get a 0 for the grade. Even if there's nothing in that column, they will automatically get a 0, and you'll see that reflected in their marking period averages. At the very bottom of the screen, you'll notice we have assignment score column, but the big thing I want you to notice here is this setting only applies when learning standards are in use. And we're going to discuss learning standards in its own video as well. This gradebook session is really just going to cover a basic gradebook. So if you're a secondary teacher or you're a teacher that is not using a standards-based report card, we would not want you to check this column. Okay, we will leave that unchecked. So as you make changes in your student information, and actually I'm going to go back up and turn off the student ID and the percent present, and I'm going to click Save. Now what you're going to notice is when I click OK, my gradebook is going to refresh, and you'll notice my grid disappeared for the percent present. And also the student ID number column is no longer visible in the advanced entry. What I would recommend when you're working in your settings, try not to turn off too many columns, because the advanced entry screen really gives you just your assignments and you can grade them. So I noticed that a lot of times teachers will go in and turn off a lot of columns and miss out on some of the things that you can see within the gradebook. So like I said, before you come in and turn off a lot of columns, check out the rapid entry screen, and we're going to show that here once we've added a few assignments. The second section is the setup section, and in this section you can do some quick action things like add a new category to your gradebook. And you can do this by clicking one time on the button and you get your add a category screen. So and I did cover this in the gradebook setup, but I'll go through this real quick here. So adding a category, I can add a category for projects. Because I'm using a summation gradebook, a total points gradebook, I will always leave my weight at a 1, and I would go down and select the summation. As I discussed in gradebook setup, the averaging is used if you want to weight your categories. In other words, your homework could be 10%, your projects could be 20%, your homework or your tests are 40%, however you would want to add that up. But again, because I'm using a summation gradebook, I will leave my weight at a 1 and I will pick the grading method of summation. I do have additional options in here, so within this category, if I want to drop the lowest or the highest score, I can do that. And I can have portal display options set. By default, it comes in as category name and detail, but you can show category name only. But the details are nice because it gives a breakdown of how the student does in each category and what their grade is at any given time per category. Now down below, of course, we have some text and background colors that you can set up, and I did talk about that in the setup video, so I'm not going to go into depth about this. One thing I will mention is in the second section, and you'll notice there's a box around this section. This is the assignment defaults, and what that is, it's a way to set up default settings for assignments without having to have the teacher go in and edit how many points. Do I have bonus points? Do I want to comment? Do I want to publish it to the portal? And speaking of the portal, the one thing we always recommend, if you are to publish all of your assignments and grades on the portal, you definitely want to have your categories set up to publish assignment and grade. So by default, I'm just going to say all of my projects are worth 200 points. I'm not going to give bonus points for now, and I can assign different multipliers, but because this is a category, I'll just leave this set to a 1. And I also want to allow a comment so that if I enter an assignment grade, I can put a comment on that grade, and parents and students, when they log into the portal, can see those comments. Now again, these are just defaults. If you add a project and that project is only worth 100 points, you can absolutely lower the points, or if it's 400 points, you can raise your max points on the assignment. But again, this is my by default, when I add a project, this is what I'd like to see. And so that's how you add a category. You can also add assignments with a single click, and that is the next button over, the assignment button. If I click on that button, you'll notice the first screen that I get, it looks a lot like the category screen with one exception. The first thing we want to do is select the category. And I'll go ahead and select the homework category. Now, because I have my homework category set up with certain defaults, you'll notice that those defaults are pulled into the assignment automatically, and I don't have to go through and click a bunch of items to get things to where I want them to be. So again, by default, my homework is going to be 20 points, but again, I'm not limited to those 20 points. I can make it a 15-point assignment, and I can add bonus points if I want. A multiplier would multiply the value of the grade times whatever number you have in the multiplier. So one thing we never want to do is have a multiplier of 0, because a grade times a 0 is a 0. So at the minimum we always want it to be a 1, but you can use any number in there. You can multiply it by 2, 3, 4, and that will give you the grade that you're looking for. The next option down, and by the way, let me mention, anytime you see an asterisk, a red asterisk in the system, that means this information is required to save a change. All right, so this section is my assignment due date. When is my assignment due? And you can use your calendar tool on the right-hand side to pick an assignment due date. By the way, I think I might have skipped over this. By default, when I pick a category, the assignment name automatically fills in, and it gives me the category name with a number behind it. So you can overwrite your assignment name, and I apologize for skipping that section. I can say, actually, let me give it here. We'll say Chapter 1. And one of the things I'll point out is sometimes I see an assignment names. I'll see read chapter 1, do questions 1 through 20 odd, which makes it a long name, especially when you're printing reports. So one of the options you have when you add an assignment is you can put in a description that completely outlines the homework assignment, and all descriptions are available for view on the student and parent portal. So I can type a description here. I'll just type the words, type a description. Now you'll notice I typed a sentence that says click here to go to my website for vocabulary words. There are a few things that you can do when you're typing an assignment description. Of course, we can change the type of font that you use, and you have 4 selections here that you can choose from. Of course, we'd want to set that font before we type the sentences, or if you highlight the words and change your font, it will change the font for you, but you have to either do it before or highlight the words to get the font to change. I like the Tahoma font, so we'll leave it there. The other thing you can do is, just like in Microsoft Word, I can bold information, I can italicize it, and I can even underline it. And again, like I said, this works just like Microsoft Word. So I bold this. And of course, we can make the text larger or smaller. We can add a color to the text if we would like. So I can change it to red, and it will show up red on the portal. And I can use my highlighter to highlight words that I want to stand out within the description. Now, one of the things I'd like to show you is there is a way that you can assign a hyperlink to a word or a picture. The key is you just have to highlight those words or highlight the picture, and it's kind of tucked into my drop-down menu here. But if I select a hyperlink, I can type in a web address where students can go to look up the information, whether it be to your external website to download a document, or maybe a reference that you want them to look at before they do their homework assignment. And I'll type in a basic web address and click OK. So what you'll notice, it looks just like any other document on the web or a hyperlink on the web, so that when your visitors go out and view this, they can click on that and it will take them to the website you have assigned. But again, assignment name here, description in this section. Now, by default, I had my category set so that I can do a comment, or I can type a comment on a student's graded assignment. And the last 2 things we'll talk about here are publish dates. So there are 2 things required to publish an assignment on the portal. You'll notice this comes from my category. I want to publish all assignments and grades to the portal automatically. But I can pick a date to when I want this to be published. Okay, so if I perhaps don't want this published until the 19th and give them one day to do the project or do the homework, I can push that out. So if you have a pop quiz coming up and you want to wait until after the quiz is over before it's published, you can use that published date and set it to whatever you would like it to be. I am going to show you Parent Portal Access, so I'll leave this set for today so that this will publish as soon as I click the Save button. All right, and of course we have our color of the text and the background color of the cells, and then you can italicize, bold, and underline the assignment as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And you're going to see my first assignment comes in here to the left side of my categories. So what you'll notice here is these items, and I know this is a category, I can tell just by looking at it because I can see at the top it's a homework, and then it gives me a breakdown. The average of the homework, or the graded assignment average, the earned points, and the total possible points that the student could have earned on an assignment. And again, because I have 4 categories, you can see that each category has its own breakdown. So I'm going to just throw in a couple more assignments here. And what you'll notice as I pick different categories, my assignment defaults change. And I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and click Save so that I have a few assignments in here. Okay, so I have 3 total assignments within the gradebook. There is a report option here, but this report option does take some setup to use. So for now, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to show you a different way to generate a report. I'm going to probably do its own separate video for you to generate reports out of the teacher gradebook using this button. But for now, like I said, we have some reports that we can help the administrators set up pretty quickly so that right away you can start generating reports out of the Teacher Connect gradebook. The other thing I'll show you here is you can export your gradebook into Excel. And one thing I like to mention when I'm doing teacher trainings is usually at the end of each market period, it's not a bad idea to export your gradebook. Save it to a network drive or to a thumb drive so that you always have a copy of your gradebook somewhere. So I'll show you how that works. If I click on the Excel icon, you'll notice that it pulls down into its own little tab here, and if I click on that button, it's going to launch Microsoft Excel. And so you can see I get a lot of information on this screen because it's exporting what is displayed in my gradebook. So, you know, you can modify this if you want to, just highlight the columns you don't need and you can delete them. So you kind of get the gist here. If you're a little familiar with Excel, you should be able to navigate through here pretty easy. And again, I would do that, at the end of each marking period, just so that you have an external copy of your gradebook. We can print a copy of the gradebook. And when we get some grades in here, it's going to look much better. So this would give me a printed copy of my gradebook. And we can import assignments. So all you really need to import an assignment is the assignment name and the student ID. And you can import that assignment into Excel. The other buttons up here at the top left or top right corner is an undo button, which we can use as we enter grades, and a save button. And we'll talk a little bit about saving your gradebook and the difference between the auto save and actually clicking the save button. Now down below, and of course like I said, we're in our advanced entry, so we have a lot of columns in here. Everything I showed you up here can be done down inside of the columns themselves. So as an example, if I don't want to see an LEP column, notice when I put my mouse over LEP, I get an arrow. If I click that arrow, I can come into columns and I can uncheck my LEP column. The other thing, and a teacher showed me this, and this was kind of exciting. I didn't even realize you could do this. You have two columns listed in here. One is your PFA, and what that is an acronym for projected final average. And what the gradebook will do is it will go out into previous marking periods if you give a midterm and a final exam. Whatever your course final average formula is, you're going to see this column fill in. Now we don't have any grades in, so that's why everything's showing as a 0. And your marking period column is obviously the average for this marking period. And what I wanted to show you here is there's a method to lock these on the left side of the screen so that when I scroll right, notice those disappear. So you can lock these in place by using that drop down arrow and clicking the lock. And now you'll notice when I scroll right, my PFA stays in the view. So I'm going to go ahead and just lock these two columns so that as I scroll in my gradebook, I can always see them and they're available to me. All right. We also have RTI indicators, the grade that the student is in, a breakdown of how many times they were tardy for the class for this marking period, how many times they were absent for the course, and then again we have student shortcuts. And like I said, I'm going to show you these shortcuts when on the roster video. So keep an eye out for the roster video. Now, of course, I added this assignment, but if I decide that I want to edit this assignment, notice I have drop downs at the top of each assignment column. So I can use the drop down and I can edit chapter 1, and it's going to open up that display just like when we clicked add the assignment. And then you have the option here to change points if you'd like, or add bonus points, or change your multiplier. So I'll save that, and you're going to see the change come in automatically. And I already explained the categories and how they're broken down. And then the very last column in each marking period, you're going to see a place where you can come in and calculate numeric scores. Now, most districts restrict this window because it's not necessary to calculate numeric scores all the time. And the system does not automatically calculate numeric scores. You have to actually come in here and calculate this column. But again, most districts will say, 2 or 3 days before the end of the marking period and 1 or 2 days after the marking period, we're going to unlock this column and teachers can post grades. Now, with that being said, that's not going to restrict parents' access to see what their current marking period average is on the portal, because that information is pulled from the marking period average column. So there's really no need to post a marking period grade all the time. That's just extra clicks that you have to do. Now, before we go into the grading part, how do we grade assignments, I'd like to show you the help menu. All right. Now, up here in the help menu, the first item in this list is the grading formulas menu. Remember when we were talking about whether I want to use a total points gradebook or a summation gradebook, or would I want to use averaging? If you're wondering what those exactly mean and how the grades are calculated, if I click on grading formula, it gives you a complete description of what total points are and how those grades are calculated. It also gives, let's see here, averaging and summation percentage. All right, so you can use, I rarely ever see these used, but the description of those grading methods are available here. We're all scored a percentage. And then at the bottom, I want you to notice we have some built-in grades that you can use for assignment grades. So as an example, if I type the word 0, the student gets a 0. If I type an I, the student gets a 0. An X or an EX, NA, excuse, they're blank grades. They're not held against the student. I can type in a late, exempt, an incomplete, or an L, and again, anything with equals 0 gives the student a 0 for that score. But you're not restricted on these values because you can edit these values. Like as an example, if I want to say all of my later assignments are worth 50% of the overall possible points, I can adjust that, and I can even create my own alpha grades that I can use to grade assignment grades. And again, these are not marking period grades, but simply assignment grades. Of course, you can print this guide out. So what I want to show you here, besides the grading formula, are your assignment scores. So if I click on assignment scores, what I'd like you to notice here is I've added a custom alpha grade called ABS for absent. So if I type absent or ABS in my book, my grade book, my equivalent is a blank, and I'm going to also list it on any missing grade reports. Okay, and these new alpha grades can be added by clicking at the top on the top left corner of your screen, and I can type in, let's see here, new for a new student, and they would be exempt from a grade. Equivalent is blank, and all I'm doing is clicking in each column. I won't list this as a missing grade. Okay. You'll notice that I have also edited my late assignment to make it worth 50% of the total possible points. If I type the word late in, they get 50%. And if you wanted to edit an existing grade like L, L is short for late, so I want that to represent the same values I have in this grade. So I can click on the equivalent, and I can type in a 50, and I can click save. Now if you add in some assignment scores and you don't want to use them, or they're just no longer apply to your grading methods, you can come in here and you can just delete the alpha grade by clicking the red circle, and it's going to remove that alpha grade. All right, so that's a little bit about navigation. So now we're going to talk about entering assignment grades. And what I'm going to do is, because I have assignments in here, I'm going to switch to rapid entry so you can see how clean the screen is. Oh, and these, I don't know how these got turned on. Let me turn these off, because these should not be displaying in my rapid entry. So what you'll notice here is that, remember I had it set to sort my assignments ascending by due date. All right, so you'll notice my 8/20 is my first assignment. So as assignments, get older, or they, have due dates, previous due dates, my new assignments will always come in on the left. And that is helpful when you have a big grade book and you're constantly scrolling to the right to put grades in. So if I want to grade a student, now let me give you a little tip here. If most of your class has done all of their homework and automatically they get 25 points, one of the tips I like to share with teachers is, if you have a couple students that maybe didn't do their work or have a different kind of a grade, you can come in and you can type in any alpha grades you've created or modified, and you can put in other grades. And lastly, what I will show you is the fill tool, which, like I said, I put in the grades that didn't make the total possible points first, and then I filled in the total possible points, and if I use my fill key, you'll see that that grade goes in for every blank area on my grade book. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a comment in for Mitchell. So you can see that to add a comment, once you've graded, you can add comments, and you can do that by clicking on the cell and clicking on the bubble with a pencil in it. And I can type a comment in here. And we'll save that. Now I can tell I have a comment in here because when I hover over it, first I see my indicator, there's a comment, and when I hover over it, I can see the comment that I've typed in for the student. And again, this is immediately available on the parent and student portal so that they can see any comments you add. So I'll go ahead and add a couple more grades. And you'll notice my categories I had set up to have different colors, and my test I bolded. So that's why my homework is blue, my tests are green, and they're also bolded. And just for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and give everyone else a 100. The other thing I'll point out is, notice as I'm typing grades, do you see this green triangle? That is an indicator that that grade is auto-saved. Right? So if there is a problem with the autosave, maybe you've lost the internet connection because you're on wirelessly, the cell would actually be highlighted in yellow, similar to what you're seeing when I hover over different cells in the gradebook, but it would happen immediately after you enter the grade. So by default, and just out of habit, I usually like to click the Save button. Even though my autosave indicator is displaying on every grade, I can click Save. Some other navigation tips when you're entering grades is, of course, if I type the grade and hit the Enter key, I go to the next cell. But I'm not limited to Enter keys. I can use my down arrow. So as I type a grade and hit the down arrow, I can use that as well. And let me fill this in, just so we have some grades available. And again, just out of habit, we'll click the Save button. Although, I'm sorry, let me back up a second because I do want to show you the Undo button. Oh, and this is another great opportunity to show you how we can erase grades. So I've entered in grades. If I want to erase all the grades I've entered, notice when I use my drop down, I can come down and use the option to erase all grades. I have other options as well, so I don't have to necessarily edit the assignment to add color or text, but I'm going to go ahead and erase all grades because I want to show you how the Undo button works. So what the Undo button does is it will allow you to go in and enter grades. I'm going to fill it. And if I click the Undo button, notice my last grade is erased from the gradebook. So as I continue to click Undo, those grades will continue to be erased. And I've clicked it 3 times, so it's just going to the bottom and it's undoing all of my grade entries. This Undo button works as long as you have not saved the last change. So I'll give you an example of what can happen. Sometimes we'll get calls from teachers and they'll tell us, oh my goodness, I was in a column that I didn't mean to be in, and I went in and I changed student scores and didn't realize I was in the wrong column. Well, if that happens to you, you can always go back as long as you haven't clicked the Save button, and you can undo those grade changes. So that's a nice feature that they added to this gradebook. So this is rapid entry. I do like this screen. It's quick when you're entering grades, and it's clean. So you're really just looking at student names and the assignments you need to grade. But I'd like to switch back to advanced entry because I want to show you how the marking, or the PFA, the projected final average, of course at this moment they're going to match because I am in marking period 1, but as I post grades and as I switch marking periods in my gradebook, this projected final average will probably be different than what your marking period average is. Okay, so you can always come back to advanced entry to look at different things, use your quick shortcuts, and even look at your category breakdowns. All right. Now, another thing I love in this advanced entry is the teacher's ability to see when parents have accessed the parent portal. And I can see that by, if I'm looking at Mitchell, notice I have a parent portal indicator. It's a box with like a person's head in it. If I hover over that box, I can see the name of the parent and when they logged in, date and time. But the really cool thing is if I click on that parent's name, it's going to give me a view of what the parent sees when they're in the portal. So if you remember, for my chapter 1 assignment, I did type a description. So if I click on the description, I can see the information I added, and if I click on this link, it's going to open up a new window, take me out to the web address that I have assigned. Whoops, sorry about that, I closed the wrong window. And you'll notice here now, because we did discuss Gradebook setup a little bit, you're going to see, remember we said to show category and details, which gives you, this is my homework category, this is the weight, did I drop the lowest or the highest, and what the category average is. So I can see that my son Mitchell's doing pretty good in his Communications 3 class. At the top, where the course is listed, of course I have the course number and the teacher name and that kind of information, but I also have the marking period average, and I did not have to post a grade to get that. I can clearly see that comes from my marking period average. So again, that's a nice quick link for students to, or I'm sorry, for teachers to go out and view what the parent sees and when they've last accessed the portal. So some other columns that I think I did not mention here is this is my test accommodations column in my advanced entry view, so I can see if there are any test accommodations for students that have IEPs. And by the way, I will mention that if your administrators upload PDF copies of IEPs, as long as the PDF is on the student's profile, as a teacher I can click on that IEP and I can view the student's IEP at any time. So at this point, we'll discuss how we can calculate a marking period grade. So again, you'll notice when I'm on rapid entry, I do not have that marking period column available to me. So I always think of rapid entry as just grading assignments. So you have two options to enter a marking period grade. You can be in the advanced entry screen and scroll to the right. You're going to come to the top of the marking period 1 column, and you would select Calculate Numeric Scores and click that option. Now we have two options here. One is going to, if I click all, it's going to auto calculate all grades including existing. So as long as I know I'm calculating everyone's grade, I can click all. My other option is to calculate missing grades. So anybody that has a blank grade, maybe I didn't post a marking period grade for 2 students because they had some work that they wanted to turn in. So you could use that missing option and it would only fill the blank cells in that marking period column. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and click all. It's going to go out and calculate the student's grade. And you can see here I have a list of every student in my gradebook and their current grade or their marking period grade. So that's the first option. Leave rapid entry, go to advanced entry, scroll to the right, post a grade. Your other option, and this is a screen that a lot of teachers like, is the report card entry screen. The reason a lot of teachers like this screen is because it gives you a complete breakdown of all of the marking period grades that have been posted. We can show the district how to calculate semester grades. And what you'll notice here is when I hover over my sigma symbol, I can see that each marking period is worth 45%, and the midterm and final exam, I need to fix my grading formula because this is a 4 marking period course. So anyways, that's because it's a semester grade, sorry about that. So again, if I'm calculating a semester 1 grade, that's going to incorporate marking period 1 and 2, and if I've taken a final exam at this point, it will calculate those grades for me. And again, I can see each of the marking periods. I can see my semester 2, which is marking periods 3 and 4, and the final exam. I can enter my midterm grades here, or my final exam grades. And then of course I can calculate the final course grades. And now we see the breakdown of all the 4 marking periods and my final exam. So this is your second option. If you want to enter comments for students, and you can do this on the advanced entry screen of the gradebook, but since we're on the report card entry screen, I'll show you from here. We have 2 options. A lot of times, or a lot of districts are moving away from free-form comments, but if your district allows free-form comments, this looks like the comment bubble you saw when we were entering in assignment grades and posted a comment. So I'll click on that and you'll see it opens up and looks exactly like the one we did on the assignment. Your other option is to use system comments. So when I click on the system comments box, you'll see my window opens and I can select comments and I can save that. And of course, when I click on the Save button, it shows just like it shows when I'm posting assignment comments. So of course I know this auto saves. One thing I will mention here is for clients that come from a Visual Fox Pro system, one of the things I think is hard to adjust to is the fact you're not going to get grade verification sheets. This is a real-time system, and what I mean when I say that is when I post a marking period grade, this grade automatically goes onto the student profile on the report card tab, and report cards are generated from exactly what you see on the screen. Okay, so again, if I even want to change a grade, I can still come in as long as my window is open, change that grade and save it, and that grade is automatically updated on the student profile. So again, I consider this my grade verification sheet, and I can, like I said, see every grade that I've entered for the student. At the end of each marking period, of course, you're going to post a grade for each marking period, so let me demonstrate how we calculate a final course grade. And we'll give them a final exam of a 92. Okay, so at the end of each course, and just note here, if you only teach this course for one marking period, you'll post the marking period grade and you will be required to post the final course grade. This does not auto-calculate, and the reason it does not auto-calculate is because we want to give the teachers an opportunity to override that final course grade if they choose to do that. And again, it's just like a marking period grade. If I post the grades, I can come in, click in the cell, and I can quickly change the grade for the student. Once I click Save, this information's in the student profile and final report cards can be generated. So if you teach a semester class, you're going to post marking period 1. At the end of marking period 2, you'll post the marking period 2 grade, and then you'll post the final course grade. This final grade column is available in the marking period view as well. And you'll notice when I come into marking period 4, I do have these two columns. So you'll clearly see that when you come to the end of the course, there are two grades that you're going to be required to post. So that's a little bit of information on how we enter assignments, how we can add an extra category, even if you're using a template. The last few I'm going to show you is the setup screen. And the reason I want to show you this is because if you come over and you calculate a marking period grade, and you feel, or if you notice as you're entering grades that the marking period average isn't what you would expect it to be, one of the things I like to recommend teachers to do is, and you may even want to do this before you begin entering grades. If you click on the setup screen, the most important thing I can stress is the first thing we want to check is always make sure that each category in the gradebook is using the same grading method. If for some reason we have 3 summation categories and 1 averaging, what happens is the system doesn't know that you want a total summation grade book. It sees mixed grading methods, and you'll get the average of the averages of each category. And of course, as you know, that is not a true total points grade book. So first troubleshooting recommendation, come into gradebook setup, review your grading methods. And again, you can change them by clicking on it one time, double clicking, and then using your drop down and make sure that we're set all categories to the same grading method. Okay, you'll notice as I click on the categories, I can see each assignment that I have posted for the teacher gradebook. So as I move down through categories, you can see that information. Of course, we can edit assignments from this screen. changing values. We can edit categories from this screen and change any values that we want from here. And the last thing I will show you on the setup screen, oh, and of course we can add assignments here as well and add categories. Basically, we can do everything from the setup screen except enter in student grades. All right. So one of the other things I'll mention is this is a neat way to just make sure that every assignment, when I come in here, I can see the date it's due, if I'm publishing it, and the published date. If you remember from my earlier add assignment screen, we have to have both fields in so that it shows on the portal. So if you get an email from a parent saying, I can't see my student's assignment on the portal, this is a good place to come in and make sure that we can see them. And you can see, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, as these assignments add up and you have more and more in here, this is a nice way to come in and just verify everything's set to publish and that we have an accurate publish date. And just like categories, we can click in here and we can change points, due dates, publish options, publish dates. So the last thing I'll show you here is if you want your midterm and final exam columns to show in the appropriate marking period when you give your final exams, you can use the Gradebook setup screen. Now, you'll want to be on the marking period. So if this is a full year class, I want to be on marking period 4, and I would want to come in and select the box for display. Now, as I mentioned before, remember when we were in the Gradebook setup screen and I could use those sigma symbols to see how a final grade was determined. So if I know that my final exam is included in that final grade, I would never want to include in the Gradebook. I only want to display it, meaning I want this column to show in my Gradebook. I want to put grades in there, but I don't want to include it into the marking period 4 total. I only want to display it. If you include it and it's also included in the final course grading average, it's going to count it once into the marking period 4 average and then again when you calculate the final course grades. So you want to make sure that we're only displaying it. If you know your school or your district isn't set up to give final exams and midterms as part of their final course grade, then you could use the include option and have it included in the marking period that you give that final exam. But for now, we'll just do a basic setup. I want it to display in my marking period 4 Gradebook, and I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button. Now what you'll notice is when I go back to the Gradebook, I now have my final exam column available in my marking period 4 screen. So that's a little bit about Gradebook navigation. As always, if you have any questions, please see your district admin, or if you would like to, you can email us at CSIU and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.